Welcome back, hunters. This is the second video in a two-part series for Savage Omega Planetes. The first video covered the basics, each role in the Savage Omega hunt, Omega's attacks, as well as some equipment and item builds. This was all a lot to cover in just one video, so I've broken it to two parts and have linked part 1 in the description down below. Today, we're covering multiplayer, the strategies for each of Omega's phases, and sharing some final thoughts on conversations around the difficulty this crossover has created. There will be timestamps in the description for you to skip to, but if you really want to amp up your support for a tiny Monster Hunter creator like myself, please consider liking the video and subscribing. Would absolutely love to have you back for more. Now, let's dive in. So this one's a bit of a doozy, and I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. There are roughly 4 categories of hunt, each with their own positive and negatives to consider. However, it's worth mentioning that there are only 2 categories of HP, single player and multiplayer. ZamoZeno on Reddit actually provided a breakdown of HP values for Omega and Savage Omega, as well as their NERSCYLLA counterparts, and found that there's no difference in multiplayer scaling for 2-player, 3-player, or 4-player. In other words, if you don't plan on hunting Savage Omega completely alone, you are literally putting yourself at a disadvantage by not filling out a full 4-person party. So take that into consideration as you make your decision. First up, single player. Don't be tempted by the lower HP as if this is somehow going to make the fight easier. Remember, NPC support hunters mean multiplayer HP, so you won't be able to bring help and expect to have lower HP values. This should legitimately be called solo player because you are going it alone. Not recommended for anyone but the sweatiest, most hardcore, dig big swingers in the Monster Hunter community. And I say that with the utmost respect, as these are the top echelon of skilled hunters. Next up, multiplayer, which is effectively split into 3 subcategories, so I'm just going to call this one team multiplayer. Essentially, this is you plus 3 other human hunters. If you go this route, you have the potential for the strongest, most effective teamwork, especially if you play your roles well and have a form of voice chat to communicate with. On the other hand, team multiplayer also has the potential for the most chaos if you're relying on SOS hunters or joining an SOS hunt. Unlike in Final Fantasy XIV, there's no mechanism to ensure that each role is represented, and you just gotta hope for the best. After that is hybrid multiplayer. This is where you have 1 or 2 people to play with, leaving you without a full party. As mentioned earlier, you're at a disadvantage without a full 4-person stack, so this is where an NPC support hunter can come in to play backfill. This simplifies having all roles accounted for, where you can select the support hunter that you want to bring. You and your friends embark on your quest, use the SOS flare to call in your NPC support, bada bing bada boom, pretty simple. The best part about it is that NPC support hunters don't consume a cart if they catch a stray missile or 2, and are legitimately quite viable in this hunt. The slight snag with this is that once you use your SOS flare, you're now opening your lobby to random hunters answering your call, completely throwing the team composition into chaos. To work around this, you could just cancel the SOS flare right after your NPC hunters join you, or you could add your friends to a link party and make your quest private. Link party members can still join you on your private quest, but human hunters won't be able to answer your SOS even if you bring NPC support hunters. Last is support multiplayer, where it's just you and the NPC hunters. On one hand, this means you can play any role you want, and you don't need a multiplayer subscription to Xbox Live or PS Plus, for example. On the other hand, though, the NPC hunters don't do quite as much in terms of damage, so in a hunt that's only 35 minutes and has a DPS check, your mileage may vary. There are benefits in playing DPS and shelling out the damage yourself, but that means that you're losing the ability to play whatever role you want in trying to make up the difference for the DPS loss of the NPC hunters. Whichever route you choose is purely subjective, but will likely still require trial and error. Whether it's learning Omega's tells, polishing up your gear for the hunt, or just trying different team compositions, there's no one best way to go about this. This is an opportunity to test the skills of the most avid hunters, and for as many recommendations as I've made in this video, there will be dozens, if not hundreds of others from the community that I simply just haven't thought of. This is the beauty of the Monster Hunter experience. So for this hunt, I'm defining each phase by its location. There will be 4 areas that you fight Omega in, and I'll be separating the strategies from one area to the next. Phase 1 doesn't require a whole lot in the lines of strategy. This is just a short phase where you learn a lot of the tells and understand most of the moves that Omega uses. Most commonly, this will include Rocket Punch, Larboard and Starboard Wave Cannons, Frost Breath, Flamethrower, and Mustard Bomb. It's a pretty small space, so the AoEs can get pretty hairy, especially since Flamethrower exhausts in 4 separate directions and changes its angle each time. There are, however, a few of the micro Omegas to pop for a shield, and this is a good opportunity to get out some party buffs or get familiarized with the role that you're playing. Speaking of roles, tanking is so integral to the hunt, but we want to make sure that we're clear on where the tank role starts and stops. It's important to know what your tank can or can't do when you're playing DPS or support, or what you yourself should do if you're playing tank yourself. Shout out to Glittering Belt 5392 over on Reddit, who put together a tank guide which includes some clarity on how enmity works in this hunt. We're all relying on the tank to obtain and sustain enmity as much as possible. However, once the tank obtains enmity, a timer begins, lasting for only about 2 to 3 minutes at a time. Once that timer expires, so does the enmity. And while the tank has enmity, they cannot build more enmity. This means it's impossible for a tank to maintain 100% enmity uptime, and to do so would require an off-tank to step in temporarily until the tank can build its enmity again. It's also worth noting that if the tank dies, they'll lose all the enmity they've built. Anytime the tank loses enmity, Omega will immediately follow with Mustard Bomb. Since moving to a new area also resets enmity, Omega will almost always open with this attack in the new area. In other words, once enmity is lost, whether by death, timeout, or changing areas, the tank has to start over from 0, and Mustard Bomb will be the signal you'll want to look out for. There are some takeaways I'll leave you with as we look forward to Phase 2. First, if your team composition requires you to maintain as much enmity uptime as possible in these phases, having the off-tank use Mog of the Ages on Omega's face is a quick way to hold aggro until the tank can get enmity back. Second, try to avoid getting the mount this early on so you can save the wounds for Phase 2 or onward. And third, if you're not an off-tank, make sure you've cast at least Palm Motif, if not Wing Motif as well, and hold on to Mog of the Ages for later. Now this is where the fight really gets going. Phase 2 starts off by targeting the first player to enter the arena. Specifically and almost exclusively, Omega will open with Mustard Bomb. While it's not as important which hunter goes first, I might suggest DPS or support lead into Phase 2 here, as the tank is going to want to focus on positioning. There are 2 hanging boulders that can be dropped on Omega to do damage and interrupt its movements. This is especially handy given that Phase 2 also includes the Pantocrator mode. Even if the tank has enmity, Omega's behaviors become erratic and can very easily throw the hunt into disarray. The precious moments afforded by a well-timed boulder drop can be instrumental. Speaking of Pantocrator mode, once Omega's done with its little temper tantrum, it'll collapse on itself as if it's tired. This will expose wounds on all 4 legs, albeit briefly. It's an absolute must to take advantage of this while you can, as you have precious few moments to pop those wounds. Additionally, this is the phase where you want to try to get a mount. In the same way that the boulders can disrupt movements, so can mounts, diverting Omega's focus to you for the time being. While you're on its back, you want to make sure that you open the wounds on both the head and back, then strike the wound on its back for your finisher. The facial wound should be reserved for the tank to pop, which will provide a bubble shield for them to use. Phase 2 also introduces some new attacks, the Blaster Beam, which will cause stun, as well as the Charge and the NERF missiles. Tanks are instrumental for all 3. The Blaster will target whoever has enmity and stun whoever gets caught in the blast. Like I said earlier, do not try to get up if you get caught in the beam. Ideally, the tank will already have enmity and be able to shield the blast, protecting any hunters behind the shield, or allowing other hunters to get behind Omega. The charge will almost always follow a successful stun from the blaster. If you don't get carded by the blaster beam, the charge will finish the job. This covers a massive amount of landscape, and as a tank, you'll want enmities so you can push this into a power clash. If you're a DPS or support hunter, you want to bear in mind that you could get caught in the charge, If you're between the tank and Omega, stay clear as much as you can. And last are NERF missiles. If the tank has enmity, these will only strike the tank and you're in the clear. If the tank does not have enmity, however, all bets are off and you might as well stick your head between your legs and kiss your ass goodbye. Every team member is about to get a taste of spicy, and I drank a whole bunch of milk and I'm lactose intolerant, so this is going to make a very bad day for all of us. You will almost always lose a cart or two. But during this phase, the job of DPS, on the other hand, is to focus on the legs. Tearing them open with wounds isn't just good for damage, it can also buy you precious moments in the interruption it causes. It will also break Omega out of Pantocrator mode. Remember, blunt weapons should be at the forelegs, severing weapons at the back legs. The entire goal is to rack up as much damage as you can without taking damage yourself. The support, on the other hand, will be doing their own damage, sure, but with a focus on heals and or buffs. Bear in mind, a hunting horn can be a pretty devastating DPS asset, but oftentimes will need wind-up time to ensure that the buffs are up and active. Sword and shield, on the other hand, will usually be able to fit where needed and react more quickly as the situation calls for it. Plan your behaviors according to what is realistic for your support role to feasibly manage, instead of healer adjust. Before you leave for the next area, by the way, you should have also cast Wind Motif, or at least have Mog of Ages on deck. Now phase 3 is where things go pants on head. Not only does Omega start including things like larboard and starboard wave cannon surges, where there are 2 consecutive wave cannon strikes, there are also tether bubbles that Omega will hurl, leaving the afflicted hunter with an HP penalty that reduces their bar by about 20%. This isn't even the worst of it. If you do enough damage, Omega will fly off and start charging its Delta attack. This is the DPS check I've been warning you about, where you only have a minute and a half, 90 seconds, to bring NERSCYLLA down. That's 22,000 HP in multiplayer, factoring out to about 245 damage per second per hunter required to keep pace. That's staggering and eye-watering, and failure to do so means an instant party wipe. So you remember the Pictomancy I was talking about? Yeah, this is it. This is where each team member should use Mog of the Ages. Compared to the 2 prior motifs, the windup for Mog is really quite short and inflicts about 1100 damage per person. If all 4 team members fire off Mog of the Ages simultaneously, that is 4,400 damage instantaneously, and that can really make or break this stage of the fight. Once you're ready to throw hands with our spidery friend, swap to your fire or paralysis weapon, grab your Rocksteady mantle, and get ready to put in some work. Most of the time, this just becomes a dog pile of fervent button mashing, trying to shell out as much damage as humanly possible. However, this often also results in getting webbed or poisoned. Poison isn't really an issue, but if there is ever a reason to carry cleansers, now's the time, or you risk losing the DPS check. Plus, if you don't get an early stun or paralysis, NERSCYLLA will jump around the map, making her harder to hit. This is where the Moorballs and the Cactuar become incredibly beneficial. You can use your Slinger Hook to activate them, and then they'll begin to walk toward whoever interacted with them. The Moorballs help with status effects and debuffs, and the Cactuar will do significant amounts of damage. Do not overlook them. If you successfully bring her down in time, she'll drop a bubble strong enough to withstand the Delta attack, and once you're safe to leave, Omega will linger in position for a few moments. This is a key opportunity for both a boulder drop and a wall drop. The wall is positioned to the left of Omega if you're looking at it straight on. The boulder is right in front, above. Both will hit from that position. Omega will end its journey in Phase 4 at the final arena you face Jin Dahad. There are only the typical boulders here and nothing otherwise noteworthy for Omega either. The only new attacks it brings is really just repeating them for a total of 3 times instead of 2. Earlier in the hunt, Omega might charge twice, but now it's 3 times. While your biggest hurdle is out of the way, you're not out of the woods yet, and it's easy to get complacent here now that the burgeoning pressure of a DPS check is out of the way. But the moment that you let your guard down, you'll be caught off guard and punished for it. The arena's size is also comparably smaller, meaning it's easier to get caught against a wall. Given the severity of the hunt overall, any careless carts will erode what chances you have left, so stay locked in, Hunter, and kick this 4-legged tin can to the curb. You've made it this far, Now it's just time to send it home. OMG! Omega 2 stonk, Capcom plus NERF. Remember way back in the Monster Hunter World era, the community raised concerns about the game being made too accessible, just to pander to the Western audience. Hunters were concerned that quality of life improvements meant the game would become easy, and that Capcom ultimately only had the dollar sign in mind. Tokuda was aware of this and answered by saying, "We're not taking things that people in the West hate and fixing them to make Western players buy it." People sometimes make that assumption, or they've got that fear, but that's not the case at all. It's more that we want to have this great core action gameplay, where players observe monster behavior and then learn how to take advantage of that and manipulate that to assist in hunting them. We want to make it so that if they make mistakes, they don't feel it's unfair, but instead think that it's their mistake and they have to grow and learn. And Hunters, it was this very same design philosophy that brought us challenges like Arch-Tempered Velkhana, Elatrian, Fatalis, and that's right, Extreme Behemoth. When these prominent walls came into the forefront of World's pinnacle challenges, there was an incredible outcry about how this was stupid, needed a nerf, ruined by sweaty Souls players who have a hard-on for completely unreasonable challenges, or it's unfair. Earlier this year, Tokuda spoke to the controversy surrounding these monsters in an interview with James Galizio of RPGsite.net, stating, "We didn't want to make it so that if you had a certain set, you could just breeze through any endgame fight. It's not the gameplay we want players to have. For endgame hunts, we want there to be distinctive differences compared to hunting story monsters." And there it is. It's the game design surrounding a fun and engaging core gameplay mechanic, but with the intent to ensure balance so no weapon build or armor was ever so overpowered that it could steamroll an endgame hunt. These are the monsters that require us to build armor and weapon sets just to answer this specific challenge. And this is where we as a community must learn to adapt to the needs of the hunt and grow with this experience, finding new strategies to walk away successful. Is this perhaps starting to sound familiar? Droves of critics flooding to review bomb Wilds because the game was too accessible, or there wasn't enough content. Barring stability and optimization issues for PC, the remainder of the arguments simply found fault with how short the story was, or not enough friction or challenge to provide substance to the experience. But then we got Lagiacrus and Seregios and the 9-star monsters. Suddenly that tune started to shift. Now we're seeing complaints centering around, "Oh, but the game is too hard," or "This is too unfair," or "How come I can't fight this," or "Capcom please nerf," coming to a crux at Savage Omega Planetes. History, Hunters, is merely repeating itself, and in 6 months or a year, all the controversy and tantrums will fade into irrelevance and obscurity, just like it did in Monster Hunter World. Already, we as a community are learning to grow and to adapt together, where we're shaped by this experience to rise to this challenge and uplift one another in our mutual journeys, no matter how frustrating that may be. This isn't bad game design meant to pad out hours of an otherwise substanceless game. That much is evident with how RNG talismans got moved up from TU3 to TU2, and there's been a steady feed of content in the title updates with new monsters, event quests, challenges, as well as festivals in the Grand Hub. Later this year with TU4, we'll be getting our first siege with Gogmazios as well, and that's not even including the content we'll be able to expect with the DLC expansion for Wilds, which will introduce Master Rank. When we compare the first 5 title updates for Monster Hunter Worlds with the first 3 from Monster Hunter Wilds, pace for pace, we have more content than 5 title updates for World, and more difficult monsters and challenges. That's right, Base Wilds now has more content than Base World and already has surpassed World in terms of difficulty in less than a year. So lock in, Hunters, the best is yet to come. On screen is a playlist of my Monster Hunter Wilds content to date. If you enjoyed yourself, please like the video and consider subscribing, or even becoming a member to help the channel out. I do daily shorts, weekly streams on Sundays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and regular long-form content just like this one. As always, I'm Jade, and may the sapphire star guide your way. I'll see you in the comments below.